be received in the way that my first record was. I didn't expect it, of course. I had no idea what was coming.
Nobody could have predicted what was coming for Tracy Chapman. The sudden fame, the secret romance that scandalized literary circles, the legal warfare. It all made her want to disappear.
I feel like there's already so much to do, you know, just in going through life, you know, and keeping things, you know, in order and functioning that I don't really need to add.
This wasn't just about avoiding social media, but about a woman who had discovered the power of saying no to the industry demands.
This is true. I'm taking a break from touring.
Yeah, for how long?
Well, I don't know how long it'll be. Maybe a year.
That maybe a year would stretch into over a decade of near total silence. But what they didn't tell you is that Tracy Chapman wasn't just taking a break from touring. She was declaring war on an entire system that thought it owned her. So let's get into it. In 1988, when MTV was dominated by big hair and synthesizers, a young black woman with an acoustic guitar changed everything overnight. Tracy Chapman's debut album wasn't supposed to work. Record executives at Elektra Records were hoping to sell 200,000 copies and call it a success. Then came the Nelson Mandela 70th birthday tribute concert at Wembley Stadium. Stevie Wonder was scheduled to perform, but technical difficulties left producers scrambling. They needed someone who could go on stage immediately with minimal setup.
They had me waiting in the wings because the schedule wasn't entirely set. I think it was pretty much in order for all of the major acts who were scheduled to play, but they were just thinking they would slot me in wherever they needed me if they had a moment.
What happened next would expose the first crack in Chapman's relationship with the industry machine. She wasn't supposed to be the highlight of that concert. She was filler, someone to kill time while the real stars got their act together. But when 72,000 people at Wembley Stadium and 600 million viewers worldwide saw her perform Fast Car, the music industry realized they had severely underestimated what they were dealing with. The performance launched her album to multi-platinum status almost overnight. 6 Grammy nominations, 3 wins. The kind of success that typically creates lifelong industry loyalists. But Chapman's reaction revealed something different was happening.
It was exciting, of course, and scary. I had all these moments, these first moments of you know, playing for bigger audiences. I'd started out playing in coffee houses and street performing.
Scary wasn't the word successful artists usually use to describe their breakthrough moments. Chapman was already signaling something the industry didn't want to hear. She wasn't comfortable with their game. The warning signs were there from the beginning. While other newly successful artists were doing the talk show circuit, appearing at industry events, and building relationships with executives, Chapman was retreating. She gave interviews, but they felt different, guarded, strategic. The industry had seen shy artists before. They could be managed, molded, controlled. But Chapman's shyness felt more like self-protection than social anxiety. She understood something most artists take years to learn. Once you give the machine access to your personal life, you never get it back. Her success created an immediate problem for the entertainment establishment. Fast Car wasn't just a hit song. It was a working-class anthem that spoke directly to economic inequality and broken dreams. The music industry loved making money from socially conscious music, but they preferred artists who would eventually be absorbed into the system. Chapman's early interviews revealed she had no intention of being absorbed by anything. Even when discussing her own music, she maintained boundaries. She would talk about the work, but not about herself. In an industry built on celebrity and personal access, this represented a fundamental challenge to how things operated. The commercial success of her debut album gave Chapman something most artists never achieve: leverage. She didn't need to compromise her vision or her privacy to maintain her career. The sales numbers proved that authenticity could be just as profitable as manufactured pop. But the industry was already planning its response. If they couldn't control Tracy Chapman through the usual methods, they would find other ways to bring her in line. They just needed to wait for her to need something from them. What they didn't anticipate was that Chapman had learned the most dangerous lesson of all. She could survive without their approval. By the early 1990s, Tracy Chapman had established a pattern that made record executives nervous. Success followed by disappearance. Massive tours followed by extended breaks. Critical acclaim followed by creative control that left no room for industry input. Her second album, Crossroads, proved the debut wasn't a fluke. But Chapman was already demonstrating behavior that the music industry considers pathological. She was uninterested in maximizing her commercial potential.
It just gets to be too much?
Yeah, it's a lot of work and, it's a lot of time away from home, and I like being home, so.
In an industry where stars were expected to live for the road, for the spotlight, for the constant promotion cycle, this simple statement was revolutionary. Chapman was openly prioritizing her personal comfort over career advancement. The pattern became more pronounced with each album cycle. Chapman would disappear for years between projects, emerging only when she had something to say musically. No filler albums, no contractual obligation releases, no attempts to chase trends or recapture past success. This independence came at a cost that wouldn't be fully apparent until decades later. While Chapman was crafting timeless music on her own terms, the industry was quietly noting every instance of her non-compliance with their expectations.
It was a gift to have had the kind of success that I had with the first record because it gave me a lot of creative freedom.
Chapman understood something that most artists miss. Early massive success creates a window of opportunity to establish boundaries. She used that window to construct an almost impenetrable wall between her art and the entertainment machine. But the machine was learning too. If Tracy Chapman couldn't be controlled through traditional industry pressure, perhaps she could be influenced through her personal relationships. The entertainment industry has always been expert at finding leverage points in artists' private lives. In the mid-1990s, they found their opening. Chapman had begun a romantic relationship with Alice Walker, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Color Purple. Walker was 20 years older, internationally famous, and completely unafraid of public controversy.
The thing is that you can't entirely escape it. I don't have an account and I don't plan to get one, but most people that I know do.
Chapman's relationship with Walker represented everything the entertainment industry wanted to exploit but couldn't access. Here was a high-profile romance with literary royalty that could have generated massive publicity and cultural credibility. Any other artist would have used the relationship to enhance their public profile. Instead, Chapman maintained complete silence about her personal life, even as Walker began discussing their relationship in interviews years later. The contrast was stark. Walker, comfortable with public attention and political controversy, and Chapman, fiercely protective of her privacy. The relationship lasted 2 years and reportedly ended badly. Walker later claimed Chapman had financial dealings with her daughter Rebecca that soured, including a lawsuit over a failed Brooklyn cyber cafe investment. The entertainment industry watched carefully, hoping the personal drama might crack Chapman's emotional armor and make her more dependent on their support system. It had the opposite effect. The relationship's end seemed to reinforce Chapman's conviction that maintaining distance from public scrutiny was essential for her survival. She became even more reclusive, even more selective about professional opportunities. By the late 1990s, Chapman had achieved something unprecedented. She had become a major recording artist who operated completely outside the industry's influence networks. She didn't attend award shows unless she was performing. She didn't socialize with other musicians or executives. She didn't participate in the favor trading system that kept most careers alive. The industry's response was predictable. If they couldn't control Tracy Chapman, they would ensure she became irrelevant. The new millennium brought a fundamental shift in how the music industry operated. Digital distribution, streaming services, and social media marketing were reshaping how artists connected with audiences. For someone like Tracy Chapman, who had built her career on traditional album cycles and radio play, the changing landscape presented both opportunity and threat. Chapman's response was characteristically defiant. She refused to adapt to systems she didn't control.
I understand. I can see why people are participating in it, but it doesn't appeal to me.
While her contemporaries were learning to navigate Twitter, Instagram, and streaming playlists, Chapman was essentially volunteering for cultural obsolescence. She wouldn't do social media. She wouldn't chase viral moments. She wouldn't participate in the constant content creation that had become essential for maintaining relevance. The industry's punishment was swift and systematic. Radio stations that had played her music for decades gradually reduced airplay. Streaming services buried her catalog in favor of more engaged artists. Music journalism, increasingly dependent on access and exclusive content, began treating Chapman like a relic from a bygone era. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: her own artistic integrity. Chapman had developed what the industry called a no-sampling policy. She categorically refused to allow other artists to use portions of her songs in their work. This put her on an unofficial do not sample list that made her compositions legally radioactive for hip-hop and R&B artists.
I never really concerned myself with the way that other people perceive me because there's nothing I can do about it. I've heard various things that people have said and trying to describe me as a protest singer.
Chapman's refusal to allow sampling wasn't about money or control. It was about context. She understood that once her music was chopped up and repurposed, the original meaning would be lost or distorted. For an artist whose songs addressed poverty, racism, and social justice, maintaining narrative integrity was more important than potential royalty income. This decision would eventually cost her far more than she realized. The entertainment industry's response to Chapman's sampling policy revealed their true priorities. Artists who refused to play the collaboration game weren't just losing opportunities, they were being actively excluded from cultural conversations. By 2008, when Chapman released Our Bright Future, the isolation was complete. The album received positive reviews, but minimal commercial support. Radio programmers dismissed it as not current. Streaming algorithms couldn't categorize an artist who had no social media presence and refused cross-promotional opportunities. Chapman had achieved something historically unprecedented. She had maintained complete artistic independence while simultaneously ensuring her own commercial irrelevance. The industry had found the perfect punishment for her non-compliance. They would simply pretend she no longer existed. For most artists, this kind of cultural erasure would be devastating. But Chapman had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. She owned her masters. She controlled her publishing. She had diversified her investments beyond music. The entertainment industry thought they were punishing Tracy Chapman. Instead, they had freed her from the last remaining chains that connected her to their system. What they didn't realize is that Chapman had been planning for this independence all along, and she was about to use that freedom in ways that would shock everyone. In 2017, something happened that would expose the true cost of Tracy Chapman's decades-long war with the music industry. Nicki Minaj, one of the biggest rap stars in the world, decided she wanted to sample Chapman's 1988 song, Baby Can I Hold You? The request should have been routine. Hip-hop artists sample older songs constantly, usually paying substantial fees for the privilege. But Chapman wasn't like other artists. She was on the industry's infamous Do Not Sample list, and she intended to stay there. Chapman's representatives denied the request multiple times. They made it clear that no amount of money would change her position. For most artists, that would have ended the discussion. Nicki Minaj wasn't most artists. She recorded the song anyway. The track, called Sorry, was a collaboration with Nas that directly interpolated Chapman's melody and lyrics. Minaj's team knew they couldn't release it commercially without Chapman's permission, but they had a different plan. They would leak the song to radio, generate buzz, and then pressure Chapman to approve the sample retroactively. The strategy backfired catastrophically. On August 10th, 2018, DJ Funkmaster Flex premiered Sorry on New York's Hot 97 radio station. Within hours, the song was circulating worldwide. Chapman's legal team immediately filed a copyright infringement lawsuit seeking $150,000 in damages. What happened next would redefine the relationship between established artists and the hip-hop industry. Minaj's defense revealed the entertainment industry's fundamental misunderstanding of Tracy Chapman. They argued that creating the unauthorized track constituted fair use because it was made for experimentation purposes. Industry executives were confident this argument would succeed. After all, countless artists created unauthorized demos every day. But Chapman's legal strategy exposed a deeper truth about how the music business really operated. Her lawsuit wasn't just about one song. It was about establishing whether artists had the right to control how their work was used, regardless of commercial pressure. In September 2020, U.S. District Judge Virginia A. Phillips granted summary judgment in favor of Minaj on the first count, stating that Minaj's experimentation with Chapman's song constituted fair use rather than copyright infringement. The industry celebrated what they thought was a victory for creative freedom. They celebrated too early. Chapman's lawyers had anticipated this ruling. Their real strategy focused on the second count, distribution. By allowing Sorry to be played on radio and circulated online, Minaj had crossed the line from experimentation to commercial exploitation. The cost of taking another songwriter's work without permission and illicitly leaking a remade version is $450,000. The $450,000 settlement sent shockwaves through the music industry. Chapman had proven that her no-sampling policy wasn't just a preference. It was legally enforceable, and violations would be expensive. But the victory represented something far more significant than money. For 30 years, the entertainment industry had treated Tracy Chapman like a relic whose opinions could be safely ignored. The Nicki Minaj settlement proved they had been wrong. Chapman's willingness to fight a high-profile legal battle against one of the industry's biggest stars demonstrated that her decades of independence hadn't weakened her position. It had strengthened it. She could afford the best lawyers. She could sustain lengthy litigation. She could win. Chapman stated she was glad to have the matter resolved and grateful for the legal outcome, which affirmed that artists' rights are protected by law. She described the lawsuit as a last resort pursued to defend herself and her work and seek protection for creative enterprise and expression. The settlement established a new precedent that would influence how the music industry approached sampling for years to come. Artists could no longer assume that unauthorized use would be forgiven or settled cheaply. Chapman had proven that maintaining artistic integrity was not only possible, but profitable. The entertainment industry had spent decades trying to diminish Tracy Chapman's influence. Instead, they had created a legal precedent that gave her more power than ever before. In March 2023, something unprecedented happened in country music. Luke Combs, a white country star, released a cover of Fast Car that would rocket to #1 on the country charts. The achievement made Tracy Chapman the first black woman to write a solo composition that topped country radio. The success of Combs' cover proved what the music industry had spent decades trying to deny. Tracy Chapman's songs were timeless, and her absence from the cultural conversation had been artificially manufactured. Thanks to how successful Combs' cover had been, Chapman became the first black woman in history to write a song to top the country music charts. The financial impact was immediate and substantial. As the sole writer of Fast Car and the owner of its publishing rights, Chapman reportedly earned $500,000 from the cover between March and June 2023 alone. But the real victory was cultural. After 15 years of near-total silence, Tracy Chapman's music was suddenly unavoidable. Fast Car was playing on country radio, pop radio, and streaming playlists. A new generation was discovering her catalog. The entertainment industry's attempt to erase her had failed completely. The Country Music Association's decision to award Chapman Song of the Year for Fast Car represented something unprecedented. An industry acknowledging the artistic value of someone they had systematically excluded. Then came the Grammy Awards on February 4th, 2024. For the first time in over a decade, Tracy Chapman agreed to perform on television. She joined Luke Combs on stage for a duet of Fast Car that reminded the world what they had been missing. The performance was electric. Chapman, now 60, showed no signs of vocal deterioration. Her guitar playing remained precise and expressive. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, with many audience members visibly emotional. The Grammy performance represented Chapman's total victory over the entertainment industry's attempts to marginalize her. She had returned on her own terms, performing her own song, with full control over the presentation. The industry that had tried to punish her for refusing to play their game was now celebrating her as a legend. The irony was undeniable. Chapman had achieved everything the entertainment industry claimed to offer: artistic respect, financial success, cultural influence, by systematically rejecting everything they demanded from her. Her refusal to use social media meant her comeback felt authentic rather than calculated. Her years of silence made her rare public appearances feel significant rather than routine. Her legal victory over Nicki Minaj had established her as someone who couldn't be taken advantage of. Chapman had previously explained that being in the public eye was uncomfortable for her and that she was a bit shy. Her Grammy performance proved that shyness and artistic integrity weren't career limitations. They were superpowers in an industry obsessed with manufactured authenticity. The woman who had been written off as irrelevant had demonstrated something the entertainment industry desperately didn't want to admit. True artistic independence was not only possible, but ultimately more powerful than industry support. Tracy Chapman had won a war that most people didn't even know was being fought. She had maintained complete creative control, accumulated substantial wealth, and achieved lasting cultural impact while refusing every compromise the industry demanded. The entertainment machine that had tried to break her had broken itself against her instead. Chapman remained standing, stronger than ever, with her integrity intact and her music more relevant than it had been in decades. She had proven that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to surrender. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.